Okay. Am I audible? Okay. Then I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So in 2016, there was this case when this 12-year-old girl basically like committed suicide because like her classmates were relentlessly bullying her online on Instagram, right? Despite the fact that she made multiple reports to Instagram, and despite the fact that she told multiple adults about it, there was nothing actually done about it because number one, Instagram didn't do anything about it, and they just left everything to be until after the aftermath was like happening, right? And we think that secondly, right, we think that even though this cyberbullying happens on months on end, right, we don't think that it's completely just up to the cyberbully's fault, right? We think that these companies who like basically act as bystanders and don't do anything about it should be liable in this as well, right? Especially when this involves like a lot of young children and young people who are very impressionable and very vulnerable to bullying, right? I think first of all, like a few responses, right? We think that it's not that arbitrary or it's not that vague about what cyberbullying is, right? We think that cyberbullying can be quite clear, especially when it does actively harm a person's mental health, right? I think there are like a few categories of cyberbullying, such as the fact that they might send harmful messages to you, right? They might dox you, right? They might post really bad stuff about you online, right? We think that all of these are very clear definitions of what cyberbullying looks like, right? We think that cyberbullying is still cyberbullying, and like I think no matter what you say, like oh, how about the severity of it, we think that at the end of the day, if somebody does feel like it's something that should be reported, right, we think that this is something that still comes under the definition of cyberbullying, right? And we think that next, we think that it's very insensitive to tell a cyberbully victim to just close their laptop or just close their phone, right? Because in the majority of cases, right, this cyberbullying happens with people who they know, right? People who like bully them online in real life, right? And even though they do close their laptop, they live with the fact and they have to sleep with the fact that people are bullying them online, that people are shaming them online, and that they're being actively teased everywhere on Instagram, on Facebook, or whatever other social media like platform that's available, right? So we think that yeah, you can't just close your laptop, right? We don't think that that's how cyberbullying works, right? And we think that companies have the capacity to actually do something about it, right? So I think now I'm going to talk about practicality. How do we think that we reduce cases of cyberbullying, right? We think that we reduce cases of cyberbullying because we think that in the status quo, reporting cases of cyberbullying is very, very difficult, and we think that it's a very systemic issue about how cyberbullying cyberbullies and cyberbullying often goes under the radar and off the hook, right? Because we think that first of all, it's very difficult to report cases of cyberbullying in status quo, right? I think the fact that I filed a report on TikTok like 3 months ago and I still didn't get a response back, I think just proves to you how ineffective the moderation tactics are in status quo, right? And we tell you there are clear reasons behind this, right? Including the fact that it's obviously like these companies are profit incentivized, and they obviously have more like incentives to care about their profits than caring about the mental health of their users, right? I think secondly, right, we think that other than the fact that it's very difficult to report cases of cyberbullying, we think that it's also very arbitrary, right? Especially when you don't hold these social media companies accountable, right? Who are you supposed to report cyberbullying cases to now, right? Because obviously there's like a fine line between reporting a case to the police and trying to reach out to Instagram to make them do something about your case, right? And before that, I'll take a POI.
Yeah, mechanize your arguments. Even if your report does get through, what can the companies do that you can't, which is to block the user?
Okay, so that's what I'm going to be talking about in my my point, right? I think the fact that they have a lot of things that they can do, but they just don't do it, is exactly what we tell you from first speaker, right? I think the fact that bullying is very difficult to prosecute in status quo, especially when it happens online, because of the fact that a lot of users are anonymous. A lot of the users cannot actually be tracked down by a government, which is the third party in this case, right? We think that it's much easier to just hold these companies accountable to, number one, investigate these cases and take accountability when something bad happens, right? Especially when it's a suicide, especially when somebody's mental health is harmed, right? So we tell you that its anonymity is like one of the factors that go into this, right? Because it's very difficult for investigating cases, especially if you're a government trying to crack like this company's system in order to prosecute this certain cyberbully, right? Because we think that because of this anonymity that has been made so easy, right? We think that cyberbullies, number one, they feel more comfortable cyberbullying other people, right? Because they're obviously anonymous and under the shrouds of the internet, right? They know that it's so difficult and it's so arbitrary to try to report these cyberbullies to like the authorities, or try to report it to like these companies, right? Because I think the worst that a company can do is ban somebody, right? I think they cannot really like change the fact that these people can just make new accounts, that these people can just go on relentlessly bullying these victims on months and months on end, right? And we tell you number two, right? It incentivizes these companies to crack down on cyberbullying, right? That's how we basically get less cases of cyberbullying. We tell you that the problem is systemic, right? I think like unlike what first speaker said on their side of the house, we think that this is something that is systemic. This is not just an issue of people bullying each other. It's an issue of how like social media functions inherently, right? I think the problem is that like number one, it's very, very systemic, and number two, it's very, very difficult to report these cyberbully cases to like authorities or to like relevant people who can actually do something about it, right? And we tell you that there are stuff that like and there are precautions that companies can take before something bad happens, right? We tell you how Valorant actually puts like has this system where you can't make another account if you are on the same device, right? Unless you somehow buy a different device to make a new account, right? And we tell you about the fact that TikTok does actually have the power to ban these people. They have the power to investigate if these cyberbullying cases get really bad, right? I think like a recent case that happened was obviously the one with like the Malaysian TikToker where she actually committed suicide, and that actually resulted in the prosecution of her cyberbully, right? We think that crackdowns look like the fact that now these companies have to now hire more people who are moderators on their platform instead of brushing it off as not a problem, right? I think the fact that now like these companies actually have a financial incentive to not get fined in the case that somebody does get cyberbullied is the exact incentive structure behind why they would actually want to, hire more moderators, right? Why they would want to make reporting these cyberbullying cases easier for people so that now it makes it less arbitrary. Now people can actually report it with the knowledge that something will be done about their cyberbullying case, right? I think they will know that these perpetrators will be taken into justice, right? And not just left aside because cyberbullying doesn't matter, right? Because we think that at the end of the day, we think that like, especially when a lot of young people use social media, we think that it's very problematic when people brush it off as something that doesn't matter and something that you can just do about. Yeah, so I'm my speech. Thank you.
Alright, thank you for that speech. Now let's have the